Where does compassion come from? I think it's an important question because I think it's one of those qualities that very few of us would come out against. There's no anti-compassion lobby. We may believe that others lack compassion. We may be astute enough to recognize that we lack compassion. But rather than trying to decide who scores what on a compassion meter, maybe it would be a wiser thing for us to ask the question, how can we get more of it? Well, I would say, like every other good thing, ultimately the answer to this is God. Compassion comes from God, who, in his compassion for his rebellious creatures, Adam and Eve, covered them with animal skins and promised them a deliverer would one day come. And God, in his compassion for us sinners, rescued Noah and his family in the ark, and in his compassion called out Moses to rescue his people. The whole Bible is the story of the compassion of God, culminating in the incarnation, Jesus taking on flesh. And the book of Hebrews tells us that we have a high priest who can sympathize with us in every way because he is like us yet without sin. So Jesus is the ultimate example of compassion, God's compassion being so deep, so great, not only that Jesus would be sent, but that Jesus would be sent as a man to die in our place. Well, I actually believe contemplating that reality is helpful for each of us in cultivating the blessings of compassion, that meditating on the grace of God in our lives can only make us more gracious, and focusing our attention on God's compassion toward us provokes compassion toward others. But I would also add that it comes back to recognizing the universality of our problems. Whether it's a sin problem where we need to show grace to others and recognizing that we all struggle with sin, or whether it's a hardship, an illness, or a loss of a job, or any sort of relational struggle, we should be able to see in the experience that others have ourselves and our own pains. And let me connect that with our own sins for this reason, because one of the reasons we tend to lack compassion is when we look at people's hardships and suffering, we connect it with their sin and we say, well, it serves you right. That's what you deserve. Well, that's true. That and more, because the Bible says that the wages of sin is death. So if you're looking at someone who's still alive, they're not getting their full due for their sin, and that includes you. Compassion says, I have received God's grace. I have not received what I'm due for everything that I've done. And therefore, I don't need to. In fact, I shouldn't be celebrating in the hardship that this other person is going through. I shouldn't be pointing out their sin as if somehow they were a worse sinner than I am. So to put it another way, one of the ways that we cultivate compassion is we recognize the sin in us. We recognize our own weaknesses and our own failures and our own selfishness. And we recognize our need for other people's compassion. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves better able to show it. I can't tell you how many times in the gospel accounts there are stories or parables or teachings from Jesus connecting our capacity to forgive with our recognition of how much we have been forgiven. So that's my counsel. I want to cultivate compassion in my own heart. I want to be able to feel and draw near to those who are in times of hardship, and remember that I have received grace, and so show it.